Okay, number 16. F of x equals x to the second power minus 1. G of x equals 1 over x minus 1. Okay. This is not going to be a pleasant problem. Okay. This is just something not all, pretty much they're all not pleasant, but this is crappier than most of them. Okay. So F, you start off with x squared minus 1. You parenthesize just the x, so the quantity moves out here, and then you put in the g. Especially on this side, this one's going to be bad. Okay, now remember how I told you to square something, okay? A fraction. You take 1 to the second power, that's 1. Now, just keep that, when you're not given a replacement, okay, you want to just keep that as x minus 1. You just want to duplicate it, but you're not going to FOIL it, okay? Now, unfortunately, we have to get a common denominator. We have to get an LCD. So in the denominator, you got x minus 1, and that's it, and underline that. So I have 2 of those factors here, okay, but none of them here. So I need to get them so they have 2. So x minus 1, x minus 1, then of course you need to bring those to the top. Now I'm not a fan of having this minus, so now that the denominators match, you're going to come over here and just copy one of the denominators. So x minus 1, x minus 1. Now, very quickly you're going to make 2 quantities, one for the top. I don't like this minus, make it plus negative, okay? So here you just have 1 from the first fraction. Now on the second, okay, first you distribute negative 1 to x and negative 1 to negative 1. So it's going to be negative 1x plus 1. Now you have to FOIL. You take negative 1x times x, or negative 1x times negative 1, then 1 times x, and 1 times negative 1. Not a fun problem. Okay, and then that is negative 1x second. Oh, sorry, fill that in here, sorry, because I still got the 1 from the first one, then I multiplied it and FOILed it. Negative 1x squared plus 2x minus 1. Okay, so we got the negative 1x to the second. We have the positive 2x, and then 1 minus 1 makes 0, so I don't put that. Now that's simplified right there. Now your domain. X is not in a root, but it is on the bottom of a fraction. So what you do if it's on the bottom of the fraction, you put the expression with the x. Usually it's in a parentheses, okay? They're both the same on this one, so you don't need to do it twice. You write x minus 1, then you put the not equal sign. Now, I didn't do that much in Algebra 2, like at all, okay? You can't, if it's on the bottom of a fraction, you take x with its expression and set it not equal to 0. Now, if there was another one, if this one wasn't the same, I'd have to do it with that one, but since they're matched, that's fine. Now you solve it. So x not equal to 1. That's your domain. X can be anything but 1, because if you put 1 in for x, that makes a 0 on the bottom. You can't have 0 on the bottom of a fraction, because 8 divided by 0, error. Okay, 8, ABC 0, error, okay? So that's why I kept asking, is it on the bottom of a fraction? So inside square root, you take the inside greater than or equal to 0. If it's on the bottom of a fraction, you take the expression, okay? I just needed to do one of them, and it's not equal to that number, okay? Okay, now G, 1 over x minus 1, okay? So you put in x second minus 1. No reason to have that parentheses there. There's not a power outside. There's no number in front to distribute. But you need to combine those. So it'd be x second minus 2. That's simplified. Circle it, because that's the answer. When he says find f and g, this is the answer for g of x. You need these two answers, and you need the domain of each. Now, is x on the bottom of a fraction? Yes, it is. So you write x squared minus 2, the not equal sign, 0. So you add 2. Then you find the square root of 2, because that's how you get rid of a second power. Now, 2, I just leave that as square root of 2. It's an irrational square root, but it's positive. Keep the not equal sign. Okay. Positive or negative square root of 2. So those are the two things that cannot equal. It can't be either one of those numbers. Okay. Okay, number 17. Nasty assignment. The person who I helped yesterday, man, wasn't kidding. Okay, so. Okay, so. Just a second, I gotta write the functions. So on number 17, f of x equals x to the second minus 2. G of x equals the square root of x plus 1. Okay. So you have to find f of g of x. G of f of x. Okay, so f, x to the second minus 2. Get your x out of there, kick the second power over here, minus. Now I'm going to put a square root in there, which is not a bad thing, okay? Because a square root and a second cancel out, and I don't need that parentheses. It's x plus 1 minus 2, okay? So it's going to be x minus 1. Now for the domain, is x on the bottom of a fraction? No, there's no fraction. Is it inside of a square root? No. Okay. So the domain is all real. Now g, okay, you start with the square root of x plus 1. And you substitute in for just the x squared minus 2. Now again, no power outside, no multiplier in front, so you just get rid of that, okay? Okay, so you have x second, negative 2 plus 1 is negative 1. Now that's simplified, but x, it's not on the bottom of a fraction, so I don't use the not equals rule, but it's in a square root, so you have to set the inside of the square root greater than or equal to 0. So you add 1, add 1. Now this one's a little bit different, or greater than or equal. So x greater than or equal, square root of 1's 1, but that could be positive or negative 1. Here's what you do when you get greater than with a positive or negative. You put, right, for your domain, you write x is greater than 1, but then when you do the negative, you have to greater than or equal to 1. On the negative, you write or, but then you have to flip it on the negative side, okay? And there's a reason why, because like, you know, you have to be greater than or equal to 0. Now, let's say, pick a number greater than 1, let's say 2. 2 to the second's 4. 4 minus 1's 3. So it'd be the square root of 3, which is possible because it's positive. Now let's pick a number less than negative 2. Let's go negative 3, or less than negative 1. Let's go negative 3. Negative 3 times itself is 9. 9 minus 1 is 8, so that's possible. So when you have to do that plus minus with a square root, it's important that you write or and then flip the sign on the negative, okay? That is your domain right there. So that's your simplified function, and that's your domain. Because he's going to want those two answers, simplified function and the domain. Okay, number 18. After number 18, we get to some quicker problems till we get to the story problems. Okay, f of x, 1 over x minus 1, g of x equals the square root of x. Okay, so we got to find f of g of x and then g of f of x. So we start with f, 1 over x minus 1. You need to lose the x and then put in the g, the square root of x. There's no need to have that parentheses there. Get rid of it. Now that's simplified, okay? But the domain's kind of tricky. Okay, question. Do you have x inside of a square root? Yes, so you put the square root greater than or equal to 0. Now the minus 1's not inside the square root, so it's just x I put greater than or equal to 0. Now there's another part of the domain, because not only is x in a square root, it's also on the bottom of a fraction, okay? So you set the entire bottom, okay? Because that's part of the domain, but you have another part, because not only is it in a square root, it's also on the bottom of the fraction. So I set the entire bottom not equal to 0. That's how you do a denominator when it's on bottom, because it's in a square root. Yes, so you set it greater than or equal to 0. Is it on bottom of a fraction? Yes, so you set it not equal to 0 and you solve it. Okay. So the square root of x is not equal to 1. Now to get rid of a square root, you take both sides to the second power. So x is not equal, 1 to the second's 1. So for the domain, you need those two things, because x is greater than or equal to 0, but then it can't be equal to 1. So it could be like 0.5, 0.9, but it cannot be dead on the money at 1. Okay? Hopefully that made sense. That's why you always ask yourself with the domain, is x inside of a square root? If yes, you set the inside of the square root greater than or equal to 0 and solve if you have to. X is on the bottom of a fraction, you set the bottom of the fraction, the entire bottom equal to 0 with the not equal sign. Okay, G, square root of x, replace the x with 1 over x minus 1. Okay. Alright, you really can't simplify that. That's pretty much all she wrote, but now the domain. Is x inside of a square root? Yes, all of it is. So you set the everything in the square root greater than or equal to 0. Now you're like, well, how do you solve that? Well, here's what you can do. You can ignore the top and just put x minus 1 greater than or equal to 0. That's kind of a rule you just got to remember. You can ignore the 1, so it'd be 1, greater than or equal to 1. Okay, so it was in a square root, but we also have to apply the not equals rule because x is on the bottom of a fraction. So we take just what's on the bottom, x minus 1, and set it not equal to 0. Then you add 1, so x is not equal to 1. So those are the two things you need to include in your answer. Greater than or equal to 1, but it cannot be exactly 1 on the money. Because you can't have a 0, you can't have something on bottom that's equal to 0, that's where the not equals come from, and you can't have a negative in the square root, okay, that's why it's less than or equal to. Okay, now we start rolling. These go quick, these next ones, but you probably wouldn't know how to do them without being kind of shown. In exercises 23 through 30, find f of x and g of x so that the function can be described as y equals f of g of x. There may be more than one possible decomposition. So looking in the back of the book isn't going to get you anywhere. Okay, we did this a little bit last year. Just right now, and here's what they want. Okay, and I'm going to show you how. They want a f of x, g of x. They want two separate functions that would be combined to make this. Now here's what you're going to do. If you have a square root, if you have a parentheses, an absolute value, an exponent, by the way, number 28, put that in put the exponent part in parentheses. And if you have a bottom, a fraction, okay, where x is on bottom, put that in parentheses. Now you circle the inside, that's going to be our g. X second minus 5x. Now, under that circle, just put an x. So f of x is a square root, and you just put x in for it. You're just replacing this then with x. So if I worked it forward, if I started with f, I'd remove the x and put that in. Okay, that's what f of g of x means. 24, y equals the quantity x cubed plus 1 to the second. Okay, so you have a parentheses. You treat that like you did the circle the inside part of the parentheses, x cubed plus 1. Then, okay, you're going to put x where that was. You can put it in parentheses or you can just put x to the second. It doesn't really matter, okay? So again, that's your g, that's the input, and then I just replace whatever that inside expression is with x. 25, y equals the absolute value of 3x minus 2. So g of x, circle the inside expression, that's your g. Put a little x there, so f of x would be an absolute value with just an x variable inside of it. 26 is like you're decomposing. Before you were composing, now you're decomposing. Okay, number 26 would be hard if you don't get the bottom in parentheses because you're not going to know. Put whatever side has the x's, that's what you're going to put in parentheses. So the g of x is x cubed minus 5x plus 3, the inside. So f of x would just be 1 over x. You can put it in parentheses if you want. So these go pretty quick. I like these. Not that they serve a great deal of value in the scheme of life, but... Okay, y equals the quantity x minus 3 to the 5th power plus 2. F of x, g of x. Okay. So the inside expression is x minus 3. Now, again, instead of that, you're just going to put a plain old x to the 5th power plus 2. Number 28. Y equals e, and then you have this exponent that says sine x. I know that looks weird. Now, if you have an exponent, okay, just make kind of a caret key, and you're going to parenthesize the exponent. So now, I pretty much know what I'm going to be doing. So the g is sine x, okay? Just the exponent. And the f, you write e to the power of x, okay? So again, if x is in the exponent, you want to parenthesize the exponent part of the expression. 29. Y equals the cosine of the quantity square root of x, okay? Now some of you might be wondering, well, do I just go with what's in the square root or do I go with the entire parentheses? It could be either one, okay? Because it says there's more than one possibility. I'm going to go with the inside the parentheses. So I'm going to put x there. So the square root of x is my g function. And then the f is cosine. And then you can just put parentheses x. Okay, and then number 30. And then I'm going to y equals tan x to the second plus 1. So again, you have an obvious parentheses. Even though this looks weird as crap, okay, I don't want to cuss on camera. Tan x is inside, that's your g. Okay, now make your quantity, and remember you're just putting x to the second plus 1.